Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. My name is Douglas Gabriel, also known as Thomas Paine in the Ass of the Globalists, and today I have with me Michael McKibben, who is going to explain to us how Dianne Feinstein is controlling your news. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hi, Douglas. Great to talk with you.
Well, every time I talk with you, it's a bit upsetting because, my worldview has to change
Really?
again. Oh, yeah. Every time I talk to you, you come up with new research, and it's
Sorry.
shocking. And you have to rearrange the way you look at things. For instance, I had no idea that Dianne Feinstein's 10% control of Avid meant that she and her husband are in on controlling whatever news is presented to America through the 6 major media networks. This is shocking. Can you tell us how you came up with this? Because this research, when you showed it to us, was really very disturbing.
I'm not sure who sent me the document, but this information is in plain sight. It's housed at the Securities and Exchange Commission in a database called the Edgar database. And all you have to do is type in Avid Technology Inc. and then ask for the Form 4 insider trading list. And voila, it's right there. It shows that between her and her husband, whose name is, I just lost it.
Richard C. Bloom.
Bloom, yes. They own over 10%. They're the largest shareholder, it appears, in Avid Technology Inc., which means then that they are the controlling shareholder in that organization. And I know some people don't understand how a 10% holding can be a controlling holding, because most people are small businesses where they think, well, we've got to have 50% control, otherwise you don't control the company. But that's not the way it works in a large public company. In a large public company, a 2, 3, 4% holding is large. Over 5% holding requires full disclosure, and a 10% holding is effectively control of the company, because the company's board of directors is not going to make a decision without consulting that largest shareholder. So a 10% holding is effectively controlling the company. It's that simple.
Well, that sure is convenient when you're running for public office, if you can control what the prompters are telling the mainstream media echo chamber to say. So Dianne Feinstein, really, shouldn't she consider Avid as being a campaign donator to her, since in fact...
Oh, absolutely.
She gets to control the narrative.
It's buried in those records, and even in her financial disclosure, she doesn't hide the fact that she has all these Avid holdings. So here is another example of where the information that should be acted upon by the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Commerce is being completely and utterly ignored.
But since she is still the senior member on the Judiciary Committee, and at one point when they had the majority, that means she was in control of oversight of the Justice Department and also criminality in this country. She then had the ability to make sure that was never looked at. Her husband was involved in all kinds of real estate scams. And as we know, she just recently stepped down from the Senate Intelligence Committee, the most corrupt committee in Washington, D.C., because it was found that her intelligence staffer, Daniel Jones, was part of these leaks through James Wolfe and the prostitute Allie Watkins. And basically, out of that committee, Dianne Feinstein was pouring information and leaks to the press. She was also controlling, part of the group that was controlling from, now they know, and they agree with what we have found in our research, since March of 2016, that intelligence committee that Dianne Feinstein sat on was directly in contact with Christopher Steele in the creation of the dossier. And then when Fusion could no longer go on, Fusion GPS, which was paid $12 million by the Democratic National Committee to come up with a smear campaign against Trump, and they used Russian agents, Estonian agents, Ukrainian agents, British agents, which are all illegal, of course, to do this. She was in cahoots with that, and Mark Warner who has now put forth some of the craziest legislation that I've ever seen to cover his own rear. He's on that committee, and he was in direct contact with Christopher Steele. So he is part of the conspiracy for the coup d'etat and for the election rigging. So right out of that committee, it was Dianne Feinstein who said that she was going to release the behind-closed-door testimony of Glenn Simpson, the head of Fusion GPS. Why did she do that? So that his lies, his alibis, could be told to the world so that everyone else could come into lockstep with that. But what did we now find out? Glenn Simpson lied. He lied, and he lied. And Dianne Feinstein, when she released this, which is almost as absurd as Adam Schiff releasing stuff from the Congressional Intelligence Committee, which he does also, which should be a crime. There's a reason you go behind closed doors, and the reason it's sealed, and no one has the right to unseal that without presidential declassification of it. But anyway, the point is that Dianne Feinstein released Glenn Simpson's testimony, and then she got off that committee. And it was out of that committee that John McCain was working to provide the Russian contacts for the dossier, and so much criminality happened in that committee. I can't even get started. But Dianne Feinstein, her assistant, Daniel Jones, received $50 million from George Soros, Oleg Deripaska, and many other foreign agents, and I call Soros a foreign agent on purpose, to continue the work of Fusion GPS when they were stopped because of the investigation and because of the lawsuits brought against them. So she, not only with her Chinese chauffeur, who she said was her chauffeur and now we know was actually conducting business in her name, literally in her name, he was such a trusted associate that sometimes when she was on the bill, she would send her chauffeur, supposedly, and he would represent her. No, this is Chinese collusion.
Wow.
So you can't get much deeper in corruption than Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah, when you look at this Avid Leader Plus election night headache piece of software and realize that they are literally writing what the news readers read in lockstep, like a bunch of lemmings, then you realize that everything we see and hear on mainstream television is a lie. It's obvious. And now we see the software they used to do it. And unfortunately, that software was stolen from us as well. And this looks to be one of the first uses of our technology that they used globally. And it does make sense. I won't get into the technical issues of why they would have used certain modules out of our invention to do this, but it wasn't that difficult to get it implemented. And now we've discovered that Lord Mark Malloch Brown financed the template for winning elections in India with Dmitry Shevelenko, who was a manager for Facebook, who went to India so that they could get this system built, and then he brought it back, and they started advertising it in 2010 for the midterm elections as a way to manage the newsroom on election night. And in fact, what is included here is a link so that whoever's writing these propaganda pieces can write them for a whole group of news readers, and then just push them out. And then this software will then send those signals right to the teleprompters that the newsreader is literally reading, and so they don't even have to think. They just repeat the lie. And so that is why we have had such difficulty, in my mind, sorting out propaganda from not propaganda, because we as normal human beings, when we hear multiple sources give us a piece of information, we tend to believe that's truthful. But what we're seeing now is we cannot believe any of that's truthful if multiple media outlets are saying the same thing. I mean, it's turned truth on its head, facts on their head. And because now we've got to start digging primarily into the research. We can't believe anything these people are telling us.
And you demonstrated
in fact, we have to assume that it's the opposite of what they're telling us.
Exactly. Assumed 180-degree opposite of what they're saying. But you've
Right.
demonstrated it because you showed a video where it looked like, a dozen, 2 dozen mainstream media
Oh, 50 or 60.
all at once saying exactly the same thing with the same emphasis, all of them standing up with it was instructions on how they would even deliver it.
Right.
There's no longer a fourth estate in
No,
the
it's
mainstream
gone.
media. It is now
And
nothing
that was
more.
those were Fox examples, by the way. So it's even worse in the others.
Wow, I didn't realize that. That's
Yeah.
scary. That's very scary. So then we know that Reuters was owned by Rothschilds, and now it's owned by Thomson, which is just a way of hiding the fact that the Rothschilds still own it. So we know that it was a banker's rag that was a propaganda piece to make money for bankers. And
I
then,
have to inject. That's Lord Mark Malloch Brown is a director of the Thomson Reuters Share Foundation here in this country.
so
So
in
that's
other
the
words,
link to the Privy Council.
it's owned by the same people who are controlling our elections, controlling the dialogue in our news, controlling what Avid and ISIS management and Leader Plus tells us about elections and about politics and about the whole world. So basically, you're saying it goes back to the British Privy Council again.
Yes. Yes.
It's
We have the facts. The facts are clear, and there's no question that this filter that's created that ends up being read on these teleprompters starts with this group of globalists that are fed out of the City of London.
And then the second place that news comes from, Reuters Thomson is the first. Almost all of our international news comes from that lying group of propagandists. But the Associated Press was owned by the Rothschilds to begin with. Again, it was created as a banker's propaganda rag. And then when that was noted, and sometimes they point that out here in America, that the overt control of basically the monarchy and their elites in Britain and in other countries, we weren't supposed to let that happen here, but it did. And now every time you come up with a new amazing thing from the research that the Americans for Innovation and all your other friends and us and the Americans, the American intelligence media and the anonymous patriots, all of us are working so hard, but every time we really look deep, it comes back to control from Britain, which is
Yes.
kind of a conspiracy, you might say. But since you have the facts, and the facts come from public documents and governmental documents, and they are irrefutable evidence, it's kind of hard to argue with that. So let's go next step. The Associated Press, to hide itself being owned by Rothschilds, was then owned by 26 separate associative groups. And then they basically became a co-op. But as we now know, all of those news agencies that take their news directly from the Associated Press, which is about 98%, and even more because the other 2% are RT and Sputnik, which is the opposite, and they're Russian. So we really have only two forms of news here in America, and that's the two Russian stations and all the rest. And those six are owned by, the mainstream media is owned by six corporations. Literally, a handful of people can get in a room and decide what the news is going to do. Recently, 300...
No, not can. They do. There's no question. That's what they do. We have been brainwashed our whole lives by this group. They've gotten more layers associated with it, with this board of broadcasting governors and the Global Engagement Center and the Digital Forensic Research. I mean, they got great names for all this stuff, but that's just more filtering. So by the time it reaches the teleprompters that we hear at night when we go home and turn on the TV, it is completely a false narrative that's run through the minds of all these, I'm going to call them evil people, because if they were respecting their fellow human beings, they wouldn't be doing this. So this whole group of people is evil in my view.
Well, certainly they are, because they know what they're doing. They know they're lying, and they know
Right.
that's against the law. And then they know that they're simply corporate mouthpieces that are giving yellow propaganda, yellow journalism and propaganda, fake news, falsehood politics, the anti-truth age. I mean, we are in a time when it's your job to be able to discern if the lies you're being told are true or not, and you can't because there is no fourth estate, because demonetization of alternative news on the internet and online has just been decimated. The 85 different companies, agencies that they went after, basically alternative news agencies, closed, many of them without any warning. Of course, you know the other ones they're going after right now. We'll see how all of that works out. But it looks as if what happened in Europe, that free speech, well, they really never had free speech, but there is no free speech whatsoever in Europe because of George Soros's Atlantic Council, the groups you've mentioned, and because he's taken action here to do the same in Facebook, in Google, in YouTube, and so in all of the different media, social media networks. They are all simply using their corporate ability to make sure that there is no free speech left in America. But things are going to rapidly change in relationship to that. When they read the prompter and they're reading the AVID script, the ISIS management script, they will not tell you who wrote the story. They will not tell you who took the picture, because the pictures are manipulated and the stories do not have authors. They are authored by someone that we don't really know. I think you would call it what you experienced in the Soviet Socialist Republic when you were there.
I think it's a boiler room of people who are receiving instructions from this brainwashing filter of all these organizations, so that they probably got some skilled people who are able to write. So they just take the lies and then they parse them up and they repeat them in a lot of different ways. So it's a boiler room of writers, in my view.
Absolutely. That's what the Associated Press is. And here's their rule, if they get a report across the AP, they have the right to change it in any way they want and send it out without checking the sources, because supposedly anything coming across Reuters, Thomson, and Associated Press has gone through vetting. No, it hasn't. It is simply being made up as they go along. 97% of the news in mainstream media about Trump is false. In other words, they're sitting there making up 97%, because most of the news is Trump. So what is it? 60, 70% of the news is simply made up, and they take anything that they see, spin it in the opposite direction, and send it back with full force, and then tell these parrot, echo chamber, mainstream media prostitutes to simply read, because they're not investigative journalists. And when you see an investigative journalist, like the one that recently died, who was looking into, with Thomas Paine from True Pundit, they were looking into a report of a journalist that had was revealing someone who said they had been raped by Bill Clinton. She's dead now. So when you get a real investigative journalist these days, oftentimes they end up dead, missing, or just obscured. So you don't see journalism that is actually verifying or vetting or finding out if what they say is true, because the National Defense Authorization Act, written in 2012, was changed by Obama to allow propaganda of American citizens. Now, Trump, we just recently reported, and the new one, named after John McCain, who is missing in action. I don't know why they think that he's still a senator, but anyway, they're probably going to appoint his dog, and then his dog will just always, vote for McCain. Even after he's passed away, his dog will still be voting the McCain ticket.
I thought we turned our back on monarchies.
Well, that's the point.
In 1776.
And he thinks he's a monarch because he defies the Logan Act and has gotten us into wars, has escalated all kinds of military action, has made deals with Russians. I mean, you want to talk about deals? How about the deals he had with Oleg Deripaska? No one's mentioning that he met with Oleg Deripaska before Oleg Deripaska met with Eric Prince. In a secret meeting on Oleg's boat. How about the secret meetings he had when he went into Syria and promised American support? How about the American support he promised to ISIS, who will be paying $1 billion? Oh, don't get me started on John McCain. But the point is that McCain is deeply involved in this. That's the reason that people like McCain get good press, because Avid always makes McCain out to be a hero. It's sad. It's blatant propaganda. It is embarrassing as an American, because in the future, people are going to ask us, Why did you sit there and do nothing when your fourth estate was flushed down the toilet by the Democratic Party and the globalists on both the left and right side? Why did you sit there and do nothing? And at least we can say we did something because we did the research and we're putting the word out there and we're letting people know that if you're watching mainstream media, not only are you hearing lies, but you're being subliminally programmed and you have no control over the fact that you will believe the crawler at the bottom of the page. You will believe the subliminal programming that you can't hear. You will believe the lies because the lies are constructed as neural networks. They are a narrative that is perception management controlled. This has been going on since the late 60s. It has been perfected. You cannot watch mainstream media and expect it to come out being objective. That is not possible.
Well, I hope that Betsy will put this chart that our folks put together in the link to this video, because this shows how the system works. And it's pretty interesting because there's an arrow that starts at the top that says globalist, rogue, CIA, news, brainwashing, filter, and then loops it around to the teleprompters. And it's actually in the form of a hook, which I just noticed, like a fish hook. And this is how this deep state brainwashing system works. This is very similar to the way the Soviets organized their disinformation department in the Communist Party. So what we're looking at here are the names and people that run our brainwashing system, bottom line.
And they know how to do it not only with flashes and lights, but with sound, subliminal programming. They know we have shown that there are hundreds of patents that have been granted, hundreds of methodologies for you to be controlled by any media that you're watching or listening to. So,
Douglas, I have a question for you. You're a behavioral expert. There are so many people involved in this. Are they all ignorant? And if they're not ignorant, how do they look at themselves in the mirror every day and get up and do the same thing on a daily basis? What's your view?
I believe that people act out of fear, and where there's love, there's no fear. And so all the mainstream media is telling you always is fear. And so if you're in a state of fear, what you're looking for is dopamine hits, serotonin hits. Now, they know how to control that with Facebook, they know how to control it with video games, and they know how to control it with the mainstream media. So you are actually getting a rush of adrenaline every time they send a subliminal message to you, though you don't know it. So you end up being upset. You end up being controlled and manipulated because of your fear. And because...
Well, let me ask you. So let's say I'm watching CNN, and I see a crawler come down with some evocative title. Are you saying there's a dopamine hit when that image or those words actually come up on the screen?
Dopamine or adrenal, one or the other. They either shock you and fear you, or they tell you lies to make you feel that what you believe, what they're telling you to believe, which is now what you believe, makes you feel good. So when I post something on Facebook, let's say, and I get 100 people respond to that, when I look at that the next time, I actually get a serotonin release in my brain because I actually think for a moment that I'm popular or people like me or I did something good. And then what does it do? This has all been shown. Even the top people at Facebook say that it was designed to create an addiction, and this addiction is more powerful than heroin. And mainstream media is the same thing. Now, let me just give an example for people to do. Go outside of your room that you're watching television at night and look at the light that comes from the dark room being emitted by the television. What you will see is they're like lightning flashes. You don't notice it when you're in it because you're in a 60 hertz cycle that puts you into a sleep that causes you to be almost hypnotized by whatever it is that comes in. So if you stand outside of the room and you watch the flashes, you'll realize that the TV is assaulting you with light. That is actually causing brain reactions whether you like it or not. And that's the reason why.
So you're saying that's intentional?
Oh, it's intentional, and commercials are the worst. Now, walk into any room where someone's been watching television, clap your hands 3 times or shout. Why are commercials on? Turn off the television. Ask them what they're watching. They won't be able to tell you. Why is that? Because the programming that is going on is so effective, it actually stops you from thinking. It puts you into your hindbrain, your reptilian brain, your cerebellum. And what happens is you basically become an animal, fight or flight. You either like it or you dislike it. And it's coming at you so fast, you don't have the ability to make a conscious decision on whether you like or dislike what it is that's being presented on the screen in colors and sounds and flashes in subliminal programming.
So you end up just repeating whatever the short phrases were that you watched. That's what I've noticed. That they just repeat the epithets, and
Correct.
That's the only argument they have on that subject.
And what do people tell you from the news? They're going to tell you the horrible part, exactly as they were told. Nothing
Right.
could be done about it. I'm in a continuous state of fear because of the huge bridge collapsing in Italy, and 39 people died. So the whole world, they're not in mourning. They're in fear. They're in fear they're going to be on a bridge and it's going to happen to them. You see. Then what happens? Oh, right after that, they're going to show you some nice delights that you can eat, that are treats that you can buy in a store on every single corner of America, or a drug that you can get, because sugar is a drug. So they're going to sell you on something that's going to give you a little adrenaline rush. Because then you'll think, oh, I can be meaningful in my life because I now know the news. I'm an omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient person who is global, who's worldwide, who knows everything, who has an opinion about everything. And you can ask me anything and I know everything because the news just told me that. Oh, that's right. The news didn't give me any international news except horrifying news. Didn't give me any facts. Notice, news agencies do not give you facts, and they do not give you sources.
They're tugging at heartstrings.
That's all they're doing. They're manipulating you. Now, to answer your question, long answer, do I believe that these people are doing this on purpose? Do I believe, well, let's just take, for instance, an Anderson Cooper. He was CIA trained. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's a criminal. Are there others who are just simply readers, parrots, who are reading the echo chamber news and they're idiots? They think that because it came across the Associated Press or Reuters Thompson that it's true. There's a lot of those people, but I would rather give this example. They asked George Soros right before the election, literally a week before the presidential election, are you worried that Trump might win? And he goes, oh, no, I've taken care of that. And the newscaster said, well, how'd you do that? And he said, by paid political announcements, I have made sure that the electorate will vote for Hillary Clinton. In other words, he was so sure that his $2 billion that he donated, much to super PACs, which then ran the most expensive campaign of ads in U.S. election history for Hillary Clinton, he was certain that that would cause everyone watching TV to go out and vote for Hillary. He bet $1 billion that Trump would lose, remember, on the stock market. And
right.
He lost $1 billion, but he lost $2 billion betting on the double loser Hillary Clinton. But the point is he believed that his paid commercial super PAC political announcements would, in fact, win the election, and that's all that he had to do. He just recently took over the European Union, of course, as you know, with Article 13 and what has just been passed, so there's no free speech in Europe. He just took over the European Union and decided he doesn't want migrants in European Union anymore, so 26 of the 28 member nations voted to have no migrants, send them all back, because they decided that George Soros told them there will be no Europe in 5 years. And so now George Soros told them pay $80 billion a year, and he will keep them on the shores of North Africa and do the asylum screening ahead of time. This was after it was found out he paid for all those boats, as we had told you before, to bring them over.
So what we're seeing is this same media system has been in operation in Europe. In fact, the Board of Broadcasting Governors has a domestic and an international arm, and so it looks like these subliminal programming methods were tried first on the European Union, and now their guns are turning toward the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. And with the strategic communication laboratories being basically closed down in Cambridge Analytica because of their corrupt uh, intervention in 44 American elections and well over 100 elections worldwide, where they brag about their ability to have mass deception so that they can get elected anyone they want. This is, again, Lord Malik Brown, who, as you can tell people, is so close to George Soros that he was one of the founding members of the Open Society Foundation. You can't get more
Correct.
George Soros than that.
Correct. And he's leading the anti-Brexit movement right now in the UK.
Which was another election overthrow of the Brexit vote because of George Soros' intervention and the lies that he made up about the misspending of the money. And so he wants to do it again. 10,000 people he has out on the street in Britain right now, door to door, telling people, let's do another vote and let's stay in the European Union. And nothing happens to George Soros, either in America or in Europe, though 14 confirmed color revolutions he was the founder of, which caused economic chaos, which in the end caused the death of millions. Nothing happens to this man. He has now taken over Facebook, and with the help of Eric Schmidt and the Digital News Initiative, and working directly with the Department of Defense and other media platforms, he is making sure that the conservative voice is squelched, that the democratic voice, the voice of open society, open borders, far left liberal progressive Democrats, as well as the socialists and even far left like Bernie and others, communists, and really the fascists. They like to put the fascists on the far right, but they're not. They're on the far left, really. So what is happening here? We're allowing George Soros to buy elections. I thought, first off, George Soros doesn't pay taxes. Why don't we just charge him for his taxes? That would put him in jail. Second off, he is manipulating these things, and it is conscious manipulation, and he's in league with Oleg Deripaska, a Russian oligarch, and Daniel Jones, Dianne Feinstein's Senate intelligence staffer, who opened Penn Quarter Group, which has $50 million to continue the dirty work that Christopher Steele was doing and then got busted for after being paid by the FBI, the Department of State, and actually being a spy working against our elections. It doesn't matter because Dianne Feinstein and her husband, Richard Bloom, can simply write the script that is read by the mainstream media that says, oh no, Dianne is a good person, and don't worry, that Chinese spy, oh no, he was just her chauffeur. Oh, don't worry, Dianne Feinstein is no longer in the Intelligence Committee of the Senate, so she can't be held responsible for the crimes she committed while she was there, because she went over to the Judiciary Committee to make sure that nothing happens there. You notice nothing much is happening from there because she resists, and she's just an opposition to any advancement besides the bureaucratic status quo. Why? Because she is the one who took SES and brought it to her home district. Why don't you tell the folks about that?
Well, she was mayor of San Francisco in 1978 when Christine Marcy helped Jimmy Carter write the laws that formed the Senior Executive Service, and then immediately she started working on bringing the SES to San Francisco the next year. So it's clear that she and Christine Marcy are joined at the hip. And as we know now, that effort has continued. And so it's obvious that Dianne Feinstein is one of the leaders of this deep state shadow government. And it's clear to me she thinks she's untouchable and has played on her Senate insider information, given that to her husband, who have together developed a $94 million net worth, and that's just what they report. So we don't know on the offshore accounts what they are actually worth. But given her involvement with Lord Mark Malloch Brown and Sir Geoffrey Patty in the UK, this involvement of these people in our election machines and this leader plus Avid suite that pushes news, scrub news to our media is, in my mind, prima facie evidence of foreign interference in our elections. I mean, I don't see how it gets more obvious than this.
Oh, she has to know Lord Malloch Brown. I mean, her husband has to know him, okay? And he has to know the other connections of Lord Malloch Brown. He has to know that there is a group writing the propaganda that the mainstream media is spitting out like garbage. They have to know that. I always think in California, Dianne Feinstein, I always like to say, yeah, she's right there with Pelosi and Maxine Waters. And that little triumvirate that's the Northern California, Southern California, and then the control headquarters of San Francisco, of course, leaving Hollywood as, a deprecation zone all of its own. But basically, those three are a perfect example because they are going to be combined and put into Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris is going to be the new combined Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi, and Maxine Waters. And if you just listen to her and look closely, she's as corrupt as they are, and she's following in the corruptocrat path that they have prepared for her. So this type of institutionalized corruption in the federal government by career politicians is why term limits must be put in place. The longer these people have been in office, the more corrupt they are. Why is it that the leadership on both sides, Republican and Democrat, the longer they've been there, the more money they have in their bank account that they can't explain unless they just happen to be the best stock market traders on the face of the earth?
Well, the game is clear now, and they all play it because because they are in Congress. They have information about what is going to happen in markets all over the world, and or they influence the kind of information that flows out of these committees, and therefore they make markets and stock and companies go up and down in value just based on what comes out of those committees. It's real clear that all of them, or most of them, let's put it that way, trade on that information. So if they know that the stock in a company is going to go down, that may be a successful company, they will wait down and buy it and then watch it come back up, and then they'll sell that stock real fast. That's not investing genius. That's called cheating. And it seems that most of them are cheating. Absolutely. They're cheating all of us who actually work for a living.
Absolutely. We just have to come up with sensible solutions. There is no reason someone should be in those offices for so long that, like Pelosi, she doesn't even know who the president is. She doesn't even know what she's saying. All you have to say is the word Republican, and she screams apocalypse. I mean, it is unbelievable. It's embarrassing. It's truly, truly embarrassing. It's kind of like some of those countries where you see their parliament and then they get into fistfights, and then the whole group of them all get into fistfights. Well, we wonder how she stays in power. Well, the reason she stays in power is pretty apparent. It's because everybody else around her is doing the same thing. So nobody wants to stop the cash cow. Absolutely.
We, the citizens, have got to stop this cash cow. They are not going to do it. Let's stop looking to Congress to do this. They are not going to do it.
And by the way, if these Congress people actually had top secret security background checks like they do in the military, which is what Trump has ordered for everyone in the federal government, they are not going to have a top secret security clearance. And like a James Clapper, who has defiled his security clearance, should go to jail for what he's said publicly, John Brennan, these people want to keep their security clearances and their access so they can go out and work for corporate intelligence and basically take what they know and sell it to corporations who are working for internationalism, for globalism. All of these corporate intelligence agencies are international. There should be none of them
think
allowed.
About how stupid. Just think how stupid Brennan was yesterday. He went on all the news shows. I was at the Y, and I saw him on all the news shows, and he was trashing Trump and saying that he was acting like a tyrant and he'd never seen anything worse. What? I mean, think about anybody who's working for. When you fire somebody for some reason, whether it's a good cause or a bad cause, as the CEO of an organization, that's your prerogative. So where does he get off saying that Trump can't fire me, Trump can't take away my power, even though I don't even work for him anymore. I mean, this guy is nuts.
It is not what they say. It is not a courtesy that you keep your top secret security clearance. That is a lie.
Right.
That is something that happened strongly at the end of the Bush administration and then into the Obama administration, where anybody, including Imran Awan, a Pakistani spy, the largest espionage case in history, got SCIF clearance through the Congress because of Andre Carson and other members on the Congressional Intelligence Committee for over a year and a half, demanding that a man who never had a security clearance be given SCIF clearance, the man who already had taken the data from 80 people in Congress and ran it through a server off-site and more than likely sold that information, the very information they blame on Guccifer 2.0, they blame on the breach of the DNC, they blame on the breach of the DC leaks.
And why does this continue?
Because of the lack of security clearances being done properly. If it was done properly, many of these SES members would not get in. Because why?
Okay, so the people responsible for this system need to all be fired and shown the door today.
That would be nice.
And if they're not, the people that should be doing it need to be fired as well. We need to clean house.
Well,
now.
People have been saying that to Betsy, and I wanted to respond to that. SES can't be closed down overnight by Trump, but he can decide to pay all SES members $1 a year because he built that into the last budget agreement. So what he can't wipe out agencies, but he can downgrade them, and he's downgrading them now, and we believe he's downgrading SES right now on a major, major scale. We're seeing this by other actions that
it can't happen fast enough for me.
I know it, because these are the bureaucratic status quo who don't allow anything to go forward. They are the resistance. They are opposition. And they're on both sides because they're globalists. And they give all the contracts to the same steady rat lines to Serco,
I mean, how
USA.
stupid is this? When you think about anybody that's out in business and they've got a bunch of people hanging around their office at the water cooler and do nothing but take the biggest jobs and the biggest cash out of your company. How stupid is that? What have we got in Washington? It is stupid.
Well, Obama made it ultra stupid by making them rotate around the SES members. In other words, the people in charge of all federal agencies rotated around every 4 months to a new job so they wouldn't have any idea what they were doing, so they would simply do what they were told because they did not have expertise in their area.
Okay, we've got to fire him. I mean, there's just no... I mean, we know the facts now.
Well, Trump is doing this. He's got Mike Mulvaney and this another person, a group of people actually, restructuring all the federal agencies. And what they're doing is merit exams. All the SES members are going to fail merit exams, okay? That's the way that's going to be. Because why? They're like a Peter Strzok. They're a guy who is a section chief for the CIA lying, saying that he's working for the FBI counterintelligence so that he can use the excuse of national security to go after an American who's running for president and then to go after a president. All of that is illegal.
Okay, so what do we do about all the mainstream media liars?
Well, here's what's going to happen. I believe CNN is going to be charged with FCC violation of the Broadcasting Act, which means that we're going to show that Avid is being written by other than people who belong to the Associated Press, which is very easy to do. We just have to track it back. And once we demonstrate that it's a conspiracy, then we know that then it's a lie. They know that they are broadcasting lies. And because Trump has taken out the clause that allows for propaganda out of the National Defense Authorization Act, they don't seem to know this. We're the only ones reporting on that. And what is really going on? CNN is getting set up just like Facebook, just like Amazon, just like YouTube and Google. They're all being set up to crash. And they were going to crash the stock market, but there's a way to get around that, and Trump knows the way to get around that. So the point is, CNN is probably going to be the test case, and they are going to be closed. And by conspiracy, everyone using Avid at that point will also be closed. So in other words, we're talking about a total reconstitution of the mainstream media so that it is not controlled by a conspiracy of propaganda, and we're talking about the social media collapsing and either being taken over as a utility by the United States government or being reconstituted by you and your company that should have been paid all along for what it is they stole from you. And it is your company alone that it could actually step in and take over these positions in these social media and then allow them to go forward without surveillance. And that is what Trump said he was going to do. He promised to do when he couldn't get Dan Coates and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to do it. He's doing it himself, and that's the reason he's threatening Amazon. He's threatening Facebook because he's going to take action. All he has to do is pull the military contracts and they fold.
It's just astounding that our country is in this situation, and you've got so many people cooperating with this. That's just there's no word for it. And what we now can see is that all these people that over the years we've trusted with information, that we trusted they weren't lying to us, and it appears more and more likely that almost all of them were lying to us.
The entire weaponized Obama administration is going to come forward like Susan Rice did, like the others have already done, if you just look at their testimony and say, I was simply following Obama's orders. Dianne Feinstein herself, I was simply following the Democratic National Committee's directives to me to go after Trump. And the fact of the matter is they know that they're liars. They know that they're evil. And it's a warning to everyone in the federal government. This is a warning. If you don't come forward now as a whistleblower, you will come forward later as a conspirator. That's a fact. And so now you see it's pouring out. FBI now, unnamed sources giving us real information on John McCain being the source of spreading the document, the dossier, and the source of giving to the FBI and Christopher Steele a list of Russians who then were pulled in to Comey's 28 crimes of treason going after Trump. So what we're seeing now is whistleblowers coming forward out of the FBI, out of the Department of Justice, and revealing these things. And the more that happens, the better it's going to be. And I warn all those who see this evil and do nothing, you're part of the evil. You need to get on the bandwagon, and
right.
You need to restore our republic, and you need to follow the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights and follow your security agreements, because a lot of people can go to Gitmo as basically enemies of the state, as treasonous enemies of the state, sedition in a coup d'etat, because they knew exactly what they were doing. Like Comey and Lynch, even Obama, Hillary, all had private Gmail accounts where they were doing business because they knew that those would not be able to be FOIA'd. That means they're guilty. That means that they, from the beginning, conspired to do these things. So Dianne Feinstein, she is one of the worst, and I just got to thank you for finding whatever it is that you found out that gave us this information. So thank you for being with us today, Michael.